From the land of conjurers, flying through the internet to your device like a UAP, hauntingly unexplained and downright weird, this is the Witching Hours, and we are ready to take off in the flash of an eye. Good evening to one and all, wherever and whenever you are listening to this program. I am Johnny the Frost, and joining me, as always, is the spectacular medium, Jenny
Oh,
Lee. How
thanks.
are you doing, Jenny?
I am okay. How are you?
Want to get weird?
Of course.
All right.
It's very, it's real weird
What's that?
is that we're on Facebook too.
This is our first
It's kind of weird.
stream from Facebook. Is it kind of weird?
It is kind of weird. Yeah.
Um,
I didn't know how to do it, but I figured it out. You have to, like, your little profile picture says live. You have to click on the profile picture
really?
and it takes you to the live feed.
Okay.
Yeah. Isn't that weird? That's weird.
That is weird.
Anyway.
So welcome to anyone who might be joining us for the first time on Facebook tonight. We picked up YouTube and now we picked up Facebook. I mean, why not? The show's going out to anybody and everybody who wants to listen to it, which is kind of what this is all about. So anyway, we reached the goal to be able to stream live on Facebook. So thank you to anyone and everyone who came over to give us a follow, to, I don't know, give us a presence over there as well.
Yeah.
We talked a little bit about that with Guru Tanet last week about social media sites, and like, I want to use this social media site, but not that social media site. I've kind of realized that to a big degree. I think some of that is just really personal bias.
Yeah.
And so, I don't know if I really have a favorite for any of these things. So off we go into
Well,
Facebook land. We are. So
I have a favorite, but let's get to the weird news.
you have a favorite. I know what your favorite is. Okay. The weird news. You ready?
Mm-hmm.
Short news segment tonight, and I do want to bring up before we get going into the weird news, or we can say this is brought to you. The weird news is brought to you by Team Weird Takeover.
Oh yeah.
This weird at Lake Shawnee Abandoned Amusement Park. We are going to be there June 7th and 8th. So if you would like to join us there for a wonderful full day and late evening, full of activities and paranormal investigation, channeling. I think we're maybe looking at doing a medium gallery.
Maybe.
Go check out the witchinghourspodcast.com. Click on there and go to Team Weird Takeover, and you can purchase any of the ticket packages there. $125 gets you tickets into the event for everything, and $170, I think it's $175, gets you all the same things, but some exclusive merchandise for the takeover. So go check it out. The witchinghourspodcast.com. The weird news, story one tonight, gamma stimulation from Alzheimer's patients, 40 hertz sensory therapy shows tremendous promise. So researchers at MIT have found that exposing the brain to light and sound pulses at a frequency of 40 hertz can improve cognitive function and reduce Alzheimer's disease symptoms. This non-invasive method, described in PLOS Biology by MIT researchers Dr. Park and Tsai, includes brain rhythms that help alleviate Alzheimer's hallmark pathologies like plaques and tangles. The approach is simple, without the side effects of traditional drugs, and has shown positive results in multiple studies. It can also benefit conditions like Parkinson's disease, multiple sclerosis, and cognitive impairments caused by chemotherapy. Multiple studies show this approach reduces amyloid plaques, preserves brain cells, improves blood flow, and enhances brain waste clearance through multiple biological mechanisms. While promising clinical trials continue, the technology shows potential not just for Alzheimer's, but also for some of those other diseases we talked about before.
Sometimes the simplest solution is the best.
Yeah. Definitely something to keep an eye on as we move forward. I know we've known a lot of people, including ourselves, who have been touched by that. So story number 2, world's oldest runestone has more pieces that contain mysterious messages, researchers say. So new research in Norway has revealed the world's oldest known runestone, discovered in 2021, and then it's part of a larger, nearly 2,000-year-old slab.
Sweet.
Scientists are working to reassemble the stone, which has runic inscriptions that are helping to shed light on its origins. The rune fragments date back to between 50 BC and 275 AD and provide rare
Wow.
evidence of early runic writing. The inscriptions include personal names, with one possibly being a woman's name, and show a mix of intentional writing and ornamental markings. The stone appears to have been intentionally broken into pieces and used in multiple burials over time, raising
Oh.
questions about the cultural and ritual significance of the rune stones. Researchers continue to decode the inscriptions and piece together the fragments to better understand their meaning and identities of the carvers.
Much older than they thought, and it's like a puzzle.
Yeah.
Put it back together.
Yeah,
That's
they've been
cool.
broken apart and like shared in multiple graves. So pretty interesting. And
Yeah.
that was tonight's short version of the weird news.
Nice. Good stories.
All right. So welcome in everybody. We're about to bring on our guests. Welcome everybody in. Glad you could be here for the witching hours. We're excited. We're excited. And if you happen to be listening from some other place over there in Facebook land or whatever, let us know. Give us a shout, and if you have any questions tonight, please put them in chat. Linda Eastburn is an author, filmmaker, and intuitive. Her latest book, Threshold to Encounters, comes from years of research in the field of alien, Bigfoot, and ghost experiences. Her other books, With Heart and Riding the Intuitive Wave, are about her life as an intuitive instructor and consultant. Today, she hosts the Linda Eastburn YouTube channel, focusing on creating a platform for others to tell their story. She was the host of the television and radio show Anomalies, founded the Midwest Research Society, where she took groups on research trips to explore the paranormal. She has spoken at conferences and universities all over the United States. Her films have played from art houses to movie theaters. Please welcome to the show, Linda Eastburn. How are you doing, Linda?
And there you are.
We got the camera going, so yeah, I'm good.
Excellent, excellent.
When we came out of the intro, all of a sudden your camera was there. I was like, oh,
Yeah,
it's working. Yay. Well, thank you for being here. Thank you for fighting through all the technical issues. And we're glad it's all working now, just in time.
Well, see, I never even got to explain this because we had the technical difficulties on your side. But I was running into it tonight too because my computer had to do a reset, and I have a pretty high speed computer, and I was like, yeah, I'll do this update real quick, and then it hung up and it like wouldn't restart,
It
and
was the same
I
kind of
was late,
problems.
and I was like, and then when I restarted it, all of a sudden like a couple things weren't working right, and I was like, oh my god, I'm gonna be late, but that's okay. Like, and then it's been the way it is tonight, but we're here and we're ready to go, Linda.
Yay.
yeah.
All right. Well, I wanted to kind of start off from the beginning tonight. So we have been talking a lot lately about, well, we've been talking quite a bit about Bigfoot. We've been talking about, of course, we're always, one of my favorite subjects is extraterrestrials, UFOs. We've talked about ghosts. So I guess we've had some conversations lately that I've basically gone to. There is a lot of effort, I think, put in nowadays to specialize in one thing. Like, I do ghosts, or I'm a UFO, a ufologist, or I'm someone who's researching the Bigfoot and cryptids. I wanted to find out from you, how did you get into the paranormal, and what led you to kind of do so many different things inside of the paranormal?
Yeah, that's a good question. It's going to take me back quite a ways to talk about how I got started. I really wasn't invested in any of this until about 1990, somewhere in that ballpark. I started taking some metaphysical classes, which, kind of got me into meditation. Then I became a hypnotherapist. I got involved in a UFO group. So that kind of opens some doors, when you start going into those inner levels of mind, or maybe I should say, you start opening up to those other dimensions or whatever that exist out there. You start having experiences. And my goal was to be more intuitive, to be more aware of, the messages coming in. Took me a while to get there. I'd always had some prophetic dreams and things like that, but it wasn't like on command, I could not do that. You know, that way it was just something that would channel through occasionally, but not very often. But then eventually I really worked hard at it. And eventually I got to the point where I was pretty intuitive about some things. And after a while, I, kind of hung out my shingle and started, doing a few sessions for people, started for free at first, and then eventually created an entire business out of that. But meanwhile, I got involved with a UFO group, and I was doing hypnosis at the time. So that gave me an into the UFO community, and that taught me a lot about UFO research. That's what the Midwest Research Society was mostly about, was about UFO research. And we traveled all over the country looking, research groups, looking at sites where something phenomenal had happened. And that was about the same time that I had the Anomalies group, the Anomalies TV show and radio show. That a lot of pretty well-known people back in that day. Stan Friedman, Linda Moten Howe, some people like that. They were all on my show at that time. So and Ted Phillips. I don't know if you know Ted Phillips, but he's associated with Marley Woods. He also, he was a sidekick to J. Allen Hynek, who did the Blue Book Project on UFOs.
Yeah.
So he co-hosted with me on my radio show. So
wow, that's awesome.
He was a wealth of knowledge, I'm going to tell you. So I had all of that kind of backing me up, and we would do some paranormal research. We would do the UFO research. Had this monthly meeting group. I put on 3 conferences. A lot of pretty well-known people showed up at those as well. And, that was all through the 90s, taking me through around 2004, something like that. So that was a lot of time in there, building my intuitive career, as well as doing the research, and all of this. And
were you using your therapy, the hypnotherapist skills to help people with contactees?
Yes, a lot of research, a lot of getting to the bottom of what their experiences really were through hypnosis. So yeah, I did that. But eventually, I moved on past that and mostly worked as a health intuitive and teaching people how to be more aware of their body, mind, spirit. So that was really where my intuitive career launched, was right there. And that's what, from 2004 to 2015, I traveled the country, had a nationwide clientele, and spoke at conferences. That's when I spoke at conferences in universities all over. So I have a pretty wide variety, including remote viewing and all these various offshoots of kind of a paranormal type of world where you can see things and know things, whether it be seeing a Bigfoot, a UFO, a fairy, a ghost, or whether it just be knowing what's inside someone's body that you can't see, but So that's kind of my background. Now, bringing me up to the place of Bigfoot, even though that's what most people today know me by, is my YouTube channel, which primarily has a lot of Bigfoot interviews. I do have some other playlists on there. Some are UFO and some are ghost paranormal. But that's not my audience as much as the Bigfoot audience, because that's kind of how my Bigfoot channel took off. But I knew nothing. I really knew nothing about Bigfoot. Didn't have a clue what questions to even ask. But what happened was I was doing this other show called Intuitive Journeys, and it was kind of a fun show. It's kind of an experimental type of show that I was doing for YouTube. It was my first experience on YouTube. But it was a group of remote viewers and we would just look at remote viewing targets. Cool. And get information about them, and then see if we were correct, whether it be something in an envelope, or we would sometimes travel to the site and get information. So that was kind of a fun thing, but it really wasn't doing very well. And I had someone do an intuitive session for me, and they said that I would, they were kind of looking at my future, but then at the end of it, she said, "Oh, and by the way, this was brought to you by Bigfoot." And I'm like, Bigfoot, and I was like, why would Bigfoot show up and tell me anything? I don't even know Bigfoot. I don't even like Bigfoot. It's like, I have absolutely no interest here. So that was kind of a shock. And, but then, as synchronicities happen, and, if you're living in this world, you know that they certainly do. So I paid attention to that. And within about a week, comes across my Facebook page that there's a Bigfoot conference coming to my area. It's the very first one they've ever had here. So I'm looking at all of these speakers, and I know none of them, of course. but Scott Nelson, I don't know if you're familiar with Scott Nelson. He's the linguist that analyzed the Sierra sounds for Ron Moorhead. He was going to be at the conference speaking. So I thought, well, he sounds interesting. Even though I didn't know anything about him. So I'm trying desperately hard through all of, everyone has some kind of an internet footprint, but he did not. I mean, nothing. I could not get in touch with this guy. So I went to the conference, got his email, sent him an invitation to be on my show. At that time, I wasn't even doing anything Zoom. I was a filmmaker. I made serious documentaries, and I was making this YouTube show. But I wasn't doing Zoom. I didn't even know how to do Zoom or an interview through Zoom. So, but he was willing to be filmed and interviewed. So I went to his hometown and stayed a couple of days. Got about 6 hours of filming underway. 3 cameras worth, which is a lot of editing when you get back home. So I came home, did the editing. I think that was in November of 2022, maybe. That's been back a ways, probably 22. And put that, finished editing, put it out, an hour show called Bigfoot the Language on, I think it was in January or February of 2023. So most of my little remote viewing intuitive journey shows were getting 100-200 views. I mean, we're talking lame. It just really didn't fly at all. So I looked at this show after we put it up, and it was, after a few hours, it was up around 800 views. And I thought, oh wow, this is an amazing show with 800 views. Whoa. And then later that evening, it was a couple hours later, I went out to dinner, checked it again, and it was up to like 2,500. And while I'm sitting there looking at this, because it's a Friday night, it's a good YouTube night, right? So it's a Friday night. So as I'm looking at this, it's going from 25, 35, 45, 55, and it zoomed up to 200,000, while I'm looking at this thing. It monetized my channel, and I was getting all kinds of people, contacting me, and all of a sudden, I become this YouTube expert, even though I only have one interview in my belt. I know nothing about Bigfoot, but I understood the value that I now have an audience, and that audience is a Bigfoot audience, and they want to know more about Bigfoot. So luckily there were a couple of other people locally I interviewed, but I was still doing like 4K camera stuff. I was doing in-person things. And I made another one called Bigfoot the Limits, a really good, well-documented case of a lot of very unusual things that happened at this property not far from here. So the everything was taken off. Everyone was enjoying my things. And if I could have kept up that level of quality, it would have been great. But you run out of people locally that you can go film easily. That it just couldn't do it. So I said, okay, let's try Zoom. We're going to see, so I was just searching the internet for anyone who'd written a book about Bigfoot or anyone, that seemed to be at a conference about Bigfoot. And I don't know these people, I'm just inviting them to be on my Zoom show, my Bigfoot. And so that's how it started. And now I have like 450 interviews 2 years later. So wow. I know a lot more about Bigfoot today.
Yes, you do.
I can imagine.
We actually went out in the woods. We made a film in an area that I'd heard of a lot of Bigfoot activity. It was called Byways of Bigfoot. And I was kind of surprised, but we really did find some footprints and trackways and some very strange, twisted, unusual branches near those footprints. And so I was kind of surprised, and a lot of people have seen Bigfoot in that area. So yeah, that was fun. It's a little dangerous when you're a 71-year-old woman out in the woods with osteoporosis and you can fall down any minute. So
watch this roots. Yeah.
But it was still fun. And we hope to be able to get back out if I could get good camera people to go out there with me and go through the more dangerous parts.
So all of this really was brought to you by Bigfoot.
It really was. It seriously was.
Yeah. She was totally spot on about that.
That's right. Now I have kind of moved. I'm still doing the Bigfoot interviews by far, but I'm kind of getting back to my roots of some of the intuitive work. I just wrote another book that's called Spy Your Way to Success, Spy Your Way to Power and Success, and it's about seeing the future. Because all my life, like I said, it's come to me spontaneously, at first. seeing things in the future, but they were usually opportunities. So I thought, wow, and if I could, because I've had a fairly blessed life, and if I could take that and bottle it and teach people how to do that, to see opportunities in the future, that's like gold. It's like handing them, a silver platter of such.
Yeah.
So I'm working on the course with that, but the book should come out probably within a few months.
So is the premise of that just tapping into your own intuition, or is there
There's,
more to it?
there's a little bit more to it than that. And, working with your intuition, as you know, I'm kind of, I'll have an impression of something, but then I have to, I like to find out, okay, what can back this up? So I worked with a physicist, a man who is a PhD in physics from Princeton University. And he had just a massive amount of information, and we worked together in lots of ways. I was doing remote viewing, and he had the science behind that. So we would do a lot of research. He's a very spiritual man as well. So we would do a lot of research with that. But just recently, I've been going back over a lot of this and really seeing the opportunity. And I'll take you back to an experience I had early on when my intuition was just beginning to kick in. And at first, you don't understand a lot of things that are happening to you, but you can do it. So I remember I was on a trip, and it was raining, and the temperature was at that borderline freezing, kind of point. And I really didn't want to drive on icy roads. So I asked, that when would I be safe? When was the ice going to come or not come, and what should I do? And I was told this one specific town down the road, and it was about, it was probably around an hour and a half, 2 hours away from where I was right then. And clearly the information that came back was, you will have dry roads. It will be completely dry at this one town, and they'll be dry from then on. So continued driving. It did not freeze, luckily, before we got there. And the minute I got to that town, it was dry roads all the way. So that just posed, 14 more questions in my mind.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, how did that happen? I know that I intuitively got that impression, but, I was working with, how we create our reality, or we create, our world, really, basically. And I asked, did I create that, or did I just intuitively know that? Because those seem to be in two compartments and two completely different things to me.
Yeah.
But the intuitive impression that came back was both. When you see it, you create it. So I kind of took that and built this course somewhat around that. And then each piece of information that's come in is, we produce a biophysics kind of process, but it has to do with DNA. It has to do with creating biophotons. It has to do with creating radiation. It has to do with being able to create order out of the randomness and chaos of future events, and be able to, to pull that in and then compartmentalize it in a pocket of radiation. This is going to be more than you ever asked for. Nobody cares about a pocket of radiation. They just want to think something and miraculously make it happen.
It sounds really cool, though.
But it's, it involves spinning and being able to get this energy to be weighted enough that it drops down into a physical form. Now, you have to remember also, I have had many, many years to process a lot of the things that's happened to me. But this was, okay, how do I create exercises that help people to get there, and to get there quickly and easily, and to be able to actually manifest rather than, make believe manifest? Because I visualized things all my life and they just didn't happen. So well, what's the problem?
What's the difference?
With this process?
Yeah.
If visualization is what actually makes that work, then why am I not able to do it from that point? But other things have come in just boom like that. They've just been there. And so what is the difference in? So I began to just ask questions intuitively, and then my questions were verified royally by this physicist who was able to help me work through that process of what is really probably going on. It's a working theory right now, but I think it's going to be a really great program for people to be able to really change their lives.
It sounds like it.
Yeah, it's exciting.
And we always love when science can back up the things, the unexplainable.
The unexplainable. And we're working in those realms that we don't physically see or experience. We don't physically, we're not able to go there physically. But if you can look at it as all just energy, then we're going in there and perceiving that energy. So how are we going to work with that energy then?
Yeah.
So it's just managing it and working with it for the, I always teach all my classes for the highest good,
Yeah.
that highest protection stuff.
So one of my issues, I guess, and like, it's not that I don't believe in the manifestation or the law of attraction and all of these things, because I've seen it happen. I know that it works, but like the same kind of thing that you were saying, it's like sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. Why does that? But then this is my other thing that I always think about with that is we're not living in a world by ourselves. Like, we're living in a world with all of these other people who are also trying to do all their own things, but they all connect and intertwine and bounce off of each other. And then the things change, things change based on other people's interactions with our own lives. Does that come up in your research at all? And if so, how does it affect our personal development of our own world?
Yeah, it does. Because I agree with you 100%. I mean, we don't live in an isolated, world. We, everyone's creating, but certainly we're all bumping into each other in those areas that we can't see.
For good or bad.
Yeah, for good or bad. A couple of things. One is some of I've worked with a lot of the Stargate remote viewers, trained with a lot of them, and some of them have, really great stories about interception, when they would be working for, law enforcement or government or whatever to find someone, and so they could apprehend them. And this was a really good insight, is that they have a group of remote viewers. They all see this one person sitting in a restaurant, bar, or something like that inside a building, at a certain time on a certain date. So they can apprehend them right there. Well, this night they were outside, the people that were trying to apprehend them, the law enforcement people. They were outside of this particular establishment. And so when this gentleman was walking to the door, they arrested him and took him. So he was in jail actually at the time that they saw he was going to be in the restaurant. He never made it into the restaurant. So he was apprehended. So that changed that trajectory, you see, of being in the restaurant, because they knew he was going to be there, so they could change that. That's a little bit of what I teach, even though I haven't really gotten into that portion of, if you see something in the future and you want to direct that in a little different direction, how can you then move that into another stage or a different outcome? But that's really not what I teach. What I teach really is being able to go in, see the opportunity, create, to see what is available out there, and what opportunities are available out there, the highest and best, with all the elements of self-love directing that, and positive intentions, and then being able to create this circumference around it. That's a charged energy. Now, this is measurable. Charged energy, not necessarily around future events, but charged energy around sacred sites or someplace where you've got a lot of life force energy that's directing something, healing energy and all of that, intuitive energy even. Those are measurable things in physics. So you create this circle, and then it becomes weighted, but you have to hold that. How many times do people visualize something, come out 3 days later, it's like, well, that's probably not going to happen.
Yep.
So what you've just done, you've dropped the ball, and every drop of charge that you have around that is gone. Or even neglect by something is another way that you drop the ball. And so it can't continue to manifest. You can't hold that in place. Even after it manifests, you've still got to hold some charged energy around that. That's focus and attention and being able to keep it going in a positive way. Now, this is something I have repetitively experienced. I feel it in my body the same way, you feel a lot of energies, or I guess energy would be the way you'd say that, an intuitive impression or an energy field. You feel that. But my husband and I, we started a real estate business some years ago and started doing real estate investing. And it went really, really well for us. But I understood where I held that. I understood there was a boundary around that investment that was very firm. And I can still feel it in my body as very, very firm, that would be very charged and very protected. And, we never lost money on a single investment. We always gained, it was a slow, steady kind of process of gaining, but I could feel that energy around it. Now, in 2005, I let go of all of that, because I knew I saw the future opportunity. I saw the future of the real estate crash. And was told very clearly to, remove myself from all of the real estate. And at first I was like, why?
Yeah.
I've been holding this energy around this, for 20 some years now, 25 years. Why would I let go of it now? I mean, that was a tough go, but I did. And, I didn't own a drop, not even the house I lived in at the time that the crash came. So I had all of my, my resources out of that investment and was sitting okay. And then as prices, of real estate was down so much, then I started slowly reinvesting. But that's what I'm talking about, opportunity. You see, where you know what to do and you know when to do it and you know how to proceed forward with something.
Yeah.
Whether it be money or relationships or health issues, no matter what it is, you have some kind of an idea of what to do. So that's what that's what I'm saying, is like to teach that, to be able to give that to people. And mostly it's just a matter of training ourselves how to be aware of those levels. It's not something that's beyond where we go when we dream, when we meditate. We're in those levels often. So it's a matter of opening up the communication and then learning how to do this manifestation process.
We got two questions. I got a question and Luce has a question. I'm gonna ask my question first. So going back to when you're talking about feeling the energy, like holding the energy, feeling it in your body, we use the word feel for a lot of different things. Like we use it for like a sensation and physical sensation. We use it for like a knowing. We use it for emotions. So for you, when you're talking about feeling, holding that energy, which one of those things are you referring to, or is it a combination of things?
Mostly it's a physical feeling, but it actually kind of resides just above the heart area of my chest, and it's almost like, when I think about it, there's a little bit of a tightness that forms there when I think about holding that in place. And I used to have this repetitive dream about dancing in the air. It was a really weird thing, but it was repetitive. And it was like, if you went fast enough or vibrated fast enough, you could just lift up off the ground and could dance in the air. But there was
like a fine dream. Those are the best.
Yeah. So it was like, but I knew that I had to hold that energy right. It's a spot right above my heart. And there's a little bit of a tiny tension there whenever I feel that, but it was like I had to hold it, because if I didn't hold it, I'm going to drop right back down into the ground. So I was teaching a class several years ago, long before I put together this course, but I was teaching a class and we were going through the various levels of learning how to be intuitive and how to manifest and things like that. And since that, that wasn't something I was overly practicing, but we were going to have to do it on the spot, and everyone had to decide something during the class that week that they were going to repetitively do and see if they could manifest it. So I don't really get into small manifestations like that, but to prove it for the class, we all had to do that. So I was going to do it. And I said, okay, well, I'm just going to work with parking spaces, because every afternoon I went to this downtown coffee shop and it had 3 or 4 parking spaces right in front of the door. But they were always, always, always a car there, so they were
Yeah.
not available. I didn't mind the walk, so I would have to park several blocks away and walk to the coffee house. So this week I decided, okay, since I know that those parking spaces are almost never available, I'm going to work with creating a parking space on my way to get to the coffee house. So I thought, well, how do I do that? What do I do? And then I remembered the holding energy, in this particular part of my body, just kind of above the heart. And I thought, okay, I'm going to visualize an empty parking space. And it was one of three. It could be one of three parking spaces that would be available when I got there. So I just and it's almost like you hold your breath. It is really kind of you up your energy just above the heart, and then you kind of hold it there, and you can't let it down. So I would think about the parking space, but I would hold that energy there and not let it down, not even for a minute, all the way to the parking space. And first day it was there, second day it was there. I mean, like for a week it was there. Every day I got a parking space right there in front. It's like, well, that's kind of interesting. And maybe I had some bearing on it. I don't know 100% for sure. But I'll tell you what was really telling is once I stopped holding that energy, because I went there every day, in the afternoon. I never got to park in front of the coffee house again. So I'm thinking, okay, this really did probably have a bearing,
Yeah.
So what I'm talking about holding energy is like you can visualize, but then if you let that energy go, it's still not going to come. It's still not going to manifest because it has to be weighted enough to drop down into a denser vibration, which means it simply goes from those higher dimensions in a higher frequency down into a lower dimension with more density so that you can actually see it, feel it, experience it, whatever it might be.
So it goes from a thought to being a thing.
From a thought to a thing. It's an energy field to an actual, physical event that, that's happening to you. Something that's the key to manifestation above and beyond just visualization, I think.
I like that because we talk about thoughts as things all the time.
Yeah.
But to think about it in that way, that it's this higher dimensional thing as a thought, but then you're bringing it down to our level. That I like that a lot. Okay. Frosty, do you want to ask Luce's question?
I gotta find it in here again. How do you keep that charged energy when you have no energy to even exist?
Yeah, that's difficult. I mean, if you have a physical problem or sometimes depression can cause that low charge of energy. Really, the charged energy I'm talking about isn't as much an emotional state, but you do have to have probably some health to be able to do it. So I don't know what their obstacle is, but I'll just reference it with this. You don't keep that charged energy all the time, but in order to charge it, you have to spin it and keep it kind of a torque spin to it. And so we do that when we go into those inner levels to and then you create a circle of charged energy around it until it's weighted and bring it back. There again, I don't know what the obstacle is. If it's physical, if it's a health issue, it's probably much easier to do this if you do have, your health to be able to function. If it's depression, there again, same thing as a health issue, basically. So it would be more challenging, I would presume, under those conditions. However, I have gone through states, of low energy, healing crisis and things like that. And I can say that often it was this type of creative energy that would kind of come back and save the day, so it can be done.
All right.
And then there was a question from Gandalf too. Do you want to ask that one, Frosty?
I'm talking about the esoteric. How far do you think we can take the esoteric? Like, how far can we really go with it? My 2 cents real quick before we let Linda answer here is really far. I don't know if there's it was one of the things I was thinking about earlier, to kind of go before I guess we get to this question. There was a couple things I wanted to say because we were talking about manifesting and talking about the things that you really wanted and how to get those things. But oftentimes I found, Linda, that through manifestation and through divination, it often seems to me like we don't really know what we want, and that the universe a lot of times we get what we want without knowing that's what we needed, if that makes any sense. And so I don't know if we really understand any of this, Gandalf. Like, what do
I
you think, Linda?
yeah, I understand. I mean, random things happen. And
Mhm,
oftentimes, there again, we can evaluate that and say, wow, I really needed that in hindsight, and you didn't really,
mhm,
feel like your energy caused that. I think we are constantly doing this process that I just said. We're just not doing it deliberately. I think that our energy field is constantly working with the future, and it's always communicating back to us. But most of the time, we stay in a pattern that is very limited, and so we're going into the future and working in a like a one lane road, that goes back and forth and back and forth, and those are patterns that we develop and limitations that we put upon ourselves. So I think we're constantly doing that. But this is breaking out of the box. This is saying what opportunities are out there that I'm not even beginning to see, that I don't even know exist.
mhm,
What's sitting out there as a potential that's like right at my back door that I don't even know. So when you're going out there and scanning that, that kind of pulls you out of the box. Now, you have to
mhm,
remember also, once you see that, once you see it and you begin the process of creating it, bringing it back into your physical reality, you have to be responsible for it. I remember years ago doing some of this work. I wouldn't have called it the same things or had the understanding that I have today, but my husband and I were looking for a lake house, and we didn't have the money to buy a lake house. Why were we looking for, it was one of those kind of fun, idealistic ideas, that we wanted a lake house.
mhm,
So we found one that we could probably sort of maybe afford, and we made an offer on it, and it was like, oh my gosh, we're creating this. So this is coming about. This is real. It was like it was a repetition of kind of wanting it and kind of looking for it. But honestly, I don't think I was wanting to take the responsibility for it after, finding it and making an offer on it. Something happened because I did like let go of that charge, let go of that energy. And it wasn't on our part. We would have followed through and gone ahead and purchased it. But it ended up that there was a problem with the title or something, so we couldn't
Mhm.
buy it. Now that's one of
Mhm.
those random things, but I think that a lot of that occurred because I wanted it, we were going to buy it, then I didn't want it, and I let go of
Yeah.
it. And so there was an obstacle came into the midst
mm,
of it,
Mhm.
that
yeah.
stopped the process.
That
Um,
does seem to happen quite a bit. We had the same scenario, like, the first time we bought a house. It was, like,
mhm.
something that we weren't really planning on. It was just kinda like one of those things where I think I kinda got a wild hair,
Mhm.
and I was like,
He does that,
"Hey,
yeah.
we should go, like, look at some houses and just, like, throw it out there and see what would happen," and she was like, "There's no way we can afford a house," like, and then, like, 2 months later, we were closing on a house, you
Yeah.
know? So it's like, yeah, I can identify or, definitely with kinda what you were talking about with the lake house for sure.
Yeah, I remember one time, and this was just like an unbelievable amount of synchronistic circumstances. But I was working. My husband was a software developer before we did the real estate full time, and we owned our own software company. And we're talking the '80s, talking ancient times as far as software companies go. But he was developing a package that we would be marketing ourselves. So there's no money, when you're developing software. So I got a job as working for a property management company, and it was like they were building 3 subdivisions, and I was in charge of managing the 3 subdivisions and leasing them all out. And it's like it was just, I was working 7 days a week, oftentimes early to late, and I was exhausted, and I didn't really want to do this anymore. But we had a house that we had leased out before they provided us with a house in one of these new housing subdivisions. So he's not working. And if I quit my job, I'm not going to be working, but I wanted to buy a house. Okay. So we're going to be both of us unemployed, and I wanted it in a certain area of town, kind of a prestigious area of town, the 3 bedroom, 2 baths, da da da. And it had to be owner financed because a bank wouldn't have touched us with a 10-foot pole, and we only wanted to put down, and we have to remember this is the 80s, we only wanted to take $2,000 out of our savings account as a down payment. So we're looking at two unemployed people that only want to put $2,000 down. We have to find in a certain area of town that has to, have this criteria to the house, and it has to be owner financing because otherwise it is going to happen. So I got this insight, that came down. It's like, look in the paper. And looked in the paper, and there was an owner finance property. I couldn't even get off work to go see it, but my husband did, and he said, "Yeah, it's fine, and we can close, and we can be moved in 2 weeks. If you give your notice." And it happened.
Wow!
He didn't even ask us if we were employed. He took us exactly $2,000 down is what he wanted. It was the exact area of town I wanted. It was 3-bedroom, 2-bath, and it was like, there we were.
Wow!
And then we just had to figure out how to pay for it. But that was never a problem. We always were hard workers.
So it sounds like your husband has been very supportive of the way that you work with manifesting. Is that true?
At that time, I wasn't doing any of this work. That was in the 80s. And it was really around 1990 that I really started my process, my journey to understand what's going on here. I wanted to know more about those inner levels. And so that's when I started taking some of the metaphysical classes and got into hypnosis and all of that. But yeah, he was always supportive. We got a divorce in 2005. And then he died in a motorcycle accident a couple of years after that, unfortunately. But we were married 23 years, and it was a really, really great time. We were a really good team together and in so many things. And this didn't bother him at all. There was not, it was never critical.
Do you think if you had someone who didn't believe in it and kind of poo-pooed on it as you were going along, that it would have been harder to do that? Like, was someone being like a naysayer?
Yeah, I think it would be because their energy, is coupled with your energy so closely. And I have since, dated people that, they believed in my prosperity in doing the work, but they didn't believe that what I did was anything, real.
Yeah.
So that was kind of interesting. And it was very hard to take them to a conference with me because they were arguing with the people that were at the conference. It was like, oh my gosh, I'm not with that person anymore. But yeah, that was an experience. But yeah, it was hard to do the work, especially if they were in the room and judging and, because all that energy, definitely plays into it. But also I'm going to say that when you're in a group of people that are very connected and very supportive, that you have so much more energy to work with to get valid and good information as well.
Yeah, then it gets bolstered by everybody else. Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And also, when I would work as a health intuitive, often, most of the time when you get a call from someone wanting a session, they're in a need. They have a need. They either have a diagnosis, that they want some confirmation about, or they're having some physical problems that they want, they want someone to give them some information on, whether it be mind, body, spirit, or looking at the physical system. I couldn't diagnose anything by any means because I'm not a doctor, but I could tell them kind of what I see and help them understand how their mind and body have worked with this and how to move themselves out of it. And I found that when they had a deep need, the information just clicked and it was always just right there present. So there's something about the intent. And also, as I did that kind of work, because a lot of it was very compassionate, I had to have my heart space in just a really good, open heart space, just in complete love and compassion for them. And whenever you arrive at that state, the only information that will come through is just the highest and the best. So I teach this manifestation process out of that same method, simply because I know it will only get you to a frequency that also vibrates with that frequency. Therefore, you can't manifest things that would be devastating to your life. And you can manifest things that are devastating to your life.
Yeah.
You have to be cautious with this energy. It's very powerful.
Yeah, you can just as easily manifest the negative and the scary as you can the wonderful and the positive.
The opening of the course, the new program I have, it really is, the very beginning is to get to know yourself. Because if you don't know that, behind this and this and this that you want is some really, self-defeating intent then it's the intent that's going to boomerang back and create in your life. So you have to really develop self-love first. You really have to. That's vital, and self-knowledge, and to be honest with yourself, and to get the ego out of the way, and to just begin to own your being, so that you can create your life.
Yeah, I feel like that's the keys to so many pieces of the spiritual work.
Yeah.
So going back to Frosty's question at the very beginning, he was asking about people kind of specify, like being a specialist in a certain topic or a certain area, and you have not done that at all. Like you are all over the place with different things. I don't know where I was going with this question. Rusty, was there some other part of that question that you had? Because like I know what I'm thinking about, but I can't phrase the question. Like,
No, I mean, what I was talking about earlier was like there seems to be a lot of specialization now. We've talked about this with a lot of people recently, but I feel like that specialization, like I feel like at some point, maybe sometimes you can't see the forest for the trees if you're not going out looking at the bigger picture, because we seem to see that all of these things are connected.
That's where we were going with it.
You
The
know,
connection.
I because I often say like Bigfoot was probably I might get some hateful comments about this, but Bigfoot was always one of my least favorite topics. Not that I didn't enjoy the topic. I'm fascinated by the topic, but compared to UFOs, compared to ghosts and EVPs, like those things, especially the UFOs, were always a thing I wanted to tune in for. History, like ancient civilizations that we don't. That was something that I wanted to tune in for sure. But what I've come to find out is like this idea that all of these things are connected: the ancient world, UFOs, Bigfoot, um, being intuitive. Like there's a connect. Like we're finding out that a lot of these people who claim to be contacted are intuitive. So it's like all these things kind of go together. And for me now, it's been hard to separate. I just see one big ball of paranormal instead of all these different slices of the pie. Is that where you wanted to go with that, Jenny?
Yeah, that's what I was trying to remember. Did you feel the same way, that everything's really just connected anyway?
I think so. And I think my background, whenever I started doing the Bigfoot interviews, I was just thinking flesh and blood creature in the woods, that was it. But as people started talking about seeing the orbs and UFOs, and then also a lot of the very unusual ghostly like experiences they often had, it seems like there are two camps. There are people that are strictly in the 4 dimensions, and that's all they perceive, period, the end. And so for them, there is nothing other than Bigfoot, flesh and blood. And they couldn't see anything if it, slapped them upside the head, because that's all they perceive. And I understand that, because a lot of people are not intuitive either, and they don't perceive intuitive insights, and they don't see ghosts, and they don't see UFOs or craft, and they don't see Bigfoot. They don't see things, or orbs. I mean, some people see, but I'm thinking now that a lot of these things are just beyond the reach of our 5 senses, and they're in a slightly different frequency base that we just can't pick up on. But some people can. It's kind of like some people can hear that high pitched sounds, and maybe I can't, but they can, and certainly my dog can, right? So we know, on a strictly physical basis, there are frequencies that we can't see. There are frequencies we can't hear, but we know they're there. Okay, because they're it's obvious, and they're measurable. Okay, so I think that there are frequencies that are so high, that there may be energies or beings, or some type of etheric being, and Bigfoot just happens to be one of those that I think can easily just drop down into a lower frequency and then go back up into a higher frequency, the same way an opera singer can go into a high frequency and then drop down into a lower frequency. I don't think it's as abnormal as people kind of try to make it out to be, like spooky, weird, really, really bizarre. I think it's probably very normal. We just make it abnormal because we don't understand how that happens. But we do understand how we lower our voice or raise our voice. We understand that. Those are frequency changes. That's all that is. That's just a frequency change. So if, we can't do that maybe physically where we become invisible, but maybe some people can. I haven't seen it yet. But, I think that some beings really can do that. So that's how a UFO craft can be visible and boom, blink out, because it just raises frequency and it's gone. Yeah.
That's been something we've been talking about. We've kind of been on a Bigfoot kick a little bit for this show. It's like one of those things where it's like, man, I really want to talk about Bigfoot more. And it was like, and then all of a sudden we've been talking a lot about Bigfoot just within the last few weeks. But two of the guests that we've had on recently, I think we're both open to the idea of a more paranormal Bigfoot, but we're really rooted in the idea of it being a physical being. But I didn't really have a problem with that at all, because they were open to the possibility. Like, they just want to find, they're just inquisitive and they want to know what the heck is out there. And they know that something's out there. They just can't put their finger around it. And they're not, some of the guests we've had on are like not intuitive. They're just like, I heard something in the woods and I want to find out what this thing is. And then I go, okay, well, that's fine with me, because you're going into it with an idea of like, I want to find out what this thing is. And if it happens to be some kind of primate that's been undiscovered, then that's fine. And if it ends up being some kind of race of ET, that's okay too. And so, that kind of goes back to a question we had from Gandalf at the beginning when they first came in the room, which was, do you have any ideas for you personally, what you think Bigfoot is, where it comes from, where it is, whatever?
Well, like I said, initially, I just assumed it was a cryptid. It hasn't been discovered yet. It's just I would have probably even at that time called it animal, but even after all my interviews, people really do look at it as more human-like. It seems to have more human-like qualities than animal-like qualities. But after all my interviews, I can say a lot of people, and you don't know if it's the person because of the way they see reality, or if it's Bigfoot because Bigfoot does strange things. Because I haven't had that experience myself with Bigfoot. But I can say now, I lean toward, and in the remote viewing sessions I've done, I think Bigfoot probably just lowers and raises frequency, is an actual flesh and blood being when they're in this lower frequency, and are not within our visual spectrum of ability to see them when they raise their vibration. Now, I just did an interview the other day, and this interview won't come out for a few weeks, but this woman was talking about being a Bigfoot researcher, and she just was stuck on the flesh and blood part of it. Just if that's all it is. I mean, she'd had a few sightings and definitely heard a lot of things, and had various types of encounters out in the woods. And to her, this was strictly a flesh and blood creature. And then one night she was out with a few other people, and there was a red orb above some trees, and it was real glittery, shiny, kind of look to it. And they were just looking at it. It was the first time she had seen an orb of any sort. And a guy behind her, because Bigfoot researchers, when they're out there in the woods, they'll often do a wood knock or a howl or something, to try to see if they get any kind of a response, in the woods nearby. And so a guy behind her did that, and she quickly just turned around, looked at him to verify it wasn't Bigfoot. It was actually a guy behind her, and it was. And she turned back around, and the red orb was gone. But up in the sky, pretty high, was now a gold orb, and it had not been there before. She said it was almost like it had glitter in it, and that glitter was falling down from it, and it was descending slowly back to the ground, or to the ground. And the minute it got to the ground, it disappeared. And from the very spot or they said it sounded like this anyway, from the very spot that gold orb hit the ground, there was a huge Bigfoot howl that came out. Now, they didn't see a Bigfoot, but there was a big Bigfoot howl right from that spot. Wow. So she said she's had to, and then she's had numerous other really bizarre experiences since then with, the idea of Bigfoot. And a lot of them have to do with sounds that they hear that doesn't make any sense whatsoever in the deep, deep woods where they are, where there's no campsites around, there are no people around. This happened to Ron Moorhead up, at the Sierra camp. There were these strange metallic sounds. And one guy described it like a drill going off, like a motorized drill. One said, it sounded like a chainsaw. And, there was no means for these sounds, metal clanging against metal. There's a lot of mooing like cows, and you're out in the woods, like maybe there's a cow nearby, but all of these sounds that don't make sense. Ron Moorhead, I know one night at the Sierra camp, woke up hearing this huge clattering of sounds, pots and pans, and he just knew that the camp site, everything they had set up out there at the campsite was just destroyed, was completely, thrown here, there, and everywhere. The next morning when he did actually get up and go out to check it, nothing. There was nothing, So there's something about the sound bleeding through that people are hearing without any evidence of what is causing this. Another guy that was on a Bigfoot research trip, they could hear something that was just like stomping, in the woods. It was more of a brushy area really, but they couldn't see anything, but they could see the brush moving, and they could hear the stomping and the cracking of leaves and limbs and, all of these noises that if a large being were in the woods, making all this movement and sound, would be causing this. And then it stopped. And I don't know if this was during the middle of the night, but when that light came up, they went over there to check because they knew that this would just be, a disaster. There would just be flattened out over there or something, but nothing was touched. They saw it move, they saw movement, and they heard it. But then when in the reality of it, there was nothing that was happening.
Very unexplained things.
Yeah, a lot.
The whole thing with Ron Moorhead is really interesting, and I saw that you did a show with him, correct, as well, right? To be able to interview him, and the first time I ran across Ron Moorhead's story was, I guess that was during Midnight in the Desert, maybe, with Art Bell. And I had heard that episode with him talking to Art, and I told Jenny, like, you gotta hear it. You gotta hear these sounds. This is absolutely insane, and I had listened to the whole program, and I listened to it again with her, and then we were lucky enough to be able to have him on the show and to listen to them. But absolutely amazing. I feel like, absolutely amazing. And then we were able to have Charlie Raymond on, and he has recorded some sounds in Kentucky as well. I don't know if you're familiar with that or.
Very similar. Yep.
Yeah, very, very similar. And I think it's pretty good evidence. I mean, you've already mentioned tonight about, the linguistics of it, being able to kind of have someone say from a military point of view that it's a separate language.
Right.
For all those people who are in the flesh and blood camp, I mean, that's still pretty good evidence. Either way you go, no matter how much of a skeptic you are, when you have military, linguist specialists talking about these being some kind of non-unknown language. Very interesting.
It is. And, of course, they never saw what created that language up at the Sierra camp. They still won't say that was Bigfoot. Eventually, some of them saw Bigfoot up at the Sierra camp, but they didn't really actually see them when they recorded that. And then that's very interesting. I mean, so many people that have these encounters, we know the various types of sounds that seem to be associated with them, but they're not always getting a visual on Bigfoot at that time.
Yeah. I never heard cows and chainsaws and drill sounds, though. That's interesting.
Yeah.
They actually had that at the Sierra camp. They had cows mooing different, and it was come from different directions.
Yeah.
And I just interviewed a few people the other day, and it was 3 guys who were at a campsite, I think in Ohio, and it was a very remote area on a bluff, and they heard this, it sounded like a drill, and they all went to the spot where they could hear it kind of sort of at a distance, and they could hear where it was coming from, the distance, the direction it was coming from. And then it would switch. It would go in a completely different location, and they'd all
wow.
run over there, and all could hear it that direction. And then it would be another direction, and that just kept playing this game with them, over and over and over. So even if by chance there was someone using some kind of an electric drill out in the middle of a wooded area, they probably weren't doing it from 4 different directions.
No, I'm just imagining in like a little parallel, like a little higher dimensional place, like cows using drills and Bigfoot, like banging pots together. I
feel like that would be even scarier. Like if all of a sudden, like if I'm out searching for Bigfoot, like the wood knocks and stuff, I'm probably okay with. But then when I hear a cow coming from my left, like, man, what's going on?
Oh my goodness.
What's going on out here?
But I think what we really have what it all boils down to is, how much can we trust our 5 senses?
Yeah.
We have a limited awareness of some of these things and how they may, kind of come together. So I think those are the bigger questions, I mean, we have such a reliance upon our 5 senses to kind of make sense of the world. And when it doesn't make sense, we just don't know quite what to make of it.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. Like, because I just putting myself in that situation, I would feel like I would start to question my sanity. Where if I hear like a wood knock or I hear a howl, it's like, okay, this is what I'm out here for. But now all of a sudden I start hearing cows and drills and now I gotta wonder, what's going on.
Yeah.
Seeing weird orbs in the sky.
That's
things like that. Yeah.
Well,
it would make a question.
We have about 30 minutes left. Trusty, do you want to kind of reset and let people know to ask questions?
Yeah. Welcome in. You are watching The Witching Hours. If you've joined us since the beginning, tonight our guest is Lina Eastburn. We're talking about all kinds of things. We've been talking about intuitiveness and spirituality. We've talked about Bigfoot, and we have some time to get into some other things. We've been getting some questions for Linda. We've been passing along. Now that we've gotten into the last part of the show here, make sure if you have a question, you send that across. No matter where you're at, we can see your questions, whether you're over on Twitch, YouTube, or on Facebook. Put them in the chat, and we will pass those along. All right. Jenny.
So let's get into some of your personal experiences. So you kind of mentioned a little bit about the Bigfoot. So you got to go out and do a Bigfoot expedition, and you got to see some footprints and some other things. Was that your only experience with Bigfoot encounters?
Yeah, that was it. Well, there was another one where when we were filming Intuitive Journeys, we were at a lake area. And one of our remote viewers had seen that there was kind of like a portal sort of thing at this lake. It was a recreational lake. So we took the whole crew out, the filming crew and everything out to this lake to kind of get a sense of, it was broad daylight. Bigfoot was still not on my radar, like that. We hadn't gotten there yet. And suddenly we hear this wood knock. Now, I'd never heard a wood knock before. And so I hear it is so loud. And I just turned back to the group and say, what was that? And D.A. Roberts, I don't know if you know D.A. Roberts, he's mostly dogman research, but he does some Bigfoot research too. And he's a fictional writer on the subject as well. But he was with us at that time we were filming, and he immediately recognized it. I think that's a wood knock. And I didn't put 2 and 2 together with that until much later. But this same lake, the weirdness of this lake, I did know the UFO phenomena that had happened there. And several people had seen a blue donut shape going slowly, skimming slowly over the water. That was back in probably the 70s, early 80s, something like that. A Bigfoot had been seen. Now, I'd heard of this, but wasn't really, thinking about Bigfoot. But I'd heard of this back in the 70s. Someone had seen a Bigfoot just in a real close proximity to there as well. So I'm thinking, well, one of our remote viewers saw that this was kind of a portal area. I'm thinking, okay, how many UFO sightings are around here, and how many Bigfoot sightings are around here? Maybe this is a portal area. I don't know. But then I started remembering a lady saw this very unusual light one night. She was driving home, and that was never explained. It was moving erratically in the sky. It was a rather large light. And another woman way back, we're talking in the 60s, had seen this huge orb of light not far from this area as well. So quite a few happenings there. And
Yeah.
my one and only, because I haven't seen a UFO, but my one and only even light phenomena that I saw wasn't far from this place either. And it was when I first started doing some of the UFO research and joined the UFO group. And I was at a country setting, just way out in the country. No houses inside except the house that we were at. And my husband was in the garage with the person we were visiting. And I was in the car waiting for him. It was about 10 o'clock at night. And I'm looking over this pasture in front of me. And there's a tree horizon way over. Otherwise, it was just open pasture. And then nothing beyond that was above the trees. But there was this orange light that was in the sky. And at first I'm thinking, oh, maybe that's an airplane or something that's going to go on over. But it didn't move. It just stayed there. So I watched it for maybe 10 minutes or so. And then suddenly it just slowly goes down behind the tree line. Well, I didn't think too much about this, except the next day we went to some neighbor's house from these people. And they were talking about these animal mutilations, these cattle mutilations. One happened right in that very field that night. And one happened at the farm to the left, and another one happened at the farm to the right. There were 3 cows mutilated that very night that I saw the orange light.
Wow.
I went back to the UFO group and said, I was like, hey, I was all excited about this. And, is there anything to this? And they said, well, you do know the orange light is associated with animal mutilations. I had no idea. So I may have witnessed some type of unusual craft or something, that the orange light represented, because those animal mutilations did happen the same night.
Goodness. So that was your only kind of UFO experience?
Yeah. I have traveled near and far. I have sit in the desert with 7,000 people. I've taken people to all kinds of places all kinds of UFOs. We went to Puerto Rico once, and everyone there, I think, had seen something but me.
Wow.
Not on that trip, but seeing UFOs just is not in my own mother saw a UFO and I didn't see it.
Man, Linda.
I know.
What about ghosts? What's your ghost experience?
Yeah, ghost. I haven't seen a ghost. I don't think I'm visual. I think I'm more sensory in other areas. I hear things. That's my dominant thing. But this was a really interesting story. It was when I was first starting to open up to my intuitive awareness, and you become more and more sensitive and more aware of energy as you do that. And I was sitting in the floor in the living room with my back to a corner wall. My husband was sitting on a sofa, and 2 friends of ours were sitting kind of on the other side of a coffee table, kind of opposite of where I was. And I kind of started feeling a little uncomfortable, and it wasn't anything I was mentally really acknowledging very much, but, something kind of like behind me, something in my back or something. And so I was probably moving around a little bit, but there was a woman there that sees energies really well. She's trained herself to be able to see a lot of things in that field, that I talked about that we don't normally perceive, but she trained herself to see that sort of thing. So eventually I said, okay, I feel kind of uncomfortable here, so I'm going to get up and sit on the sofa. And she said, well, she could see some energy behind me moving around in that corner. So she thought maybe that was what was making me uncomfortable. Now, this is the really interesting synchronicity of this story, however. That in and of itself is not anything grand. But I was doing hypnosis, and I had a little office in my home. And there was a gentleman that had made an appointment several weeks before, and he came a few days after I'd had that experience. And he walked in the front door, and I had a hallway in the front door that led into this living room. And then if you went on down the hall, it went into the family room with a sliding glass door in the back. So he walked in the front door, and I'm guiding him to go into this small living room where I actually felt that energy, and he didn't go. And it's like, what's going on here? I didn't know him. It wasn't like he was familiar enough to be just rebelling against something I'd ask him to do.
Yeah.
So he just walked in, and then suddenly he darts into the family room and out to the sliding glass door, and he looks out there. Then he comes back to the hall, and he crosses his arms, and I'm beginning to think, should I leave? Because I'm not sure if he's okay or what. So finally he explains what his behavior is about. And he had come to my house for a hypnosis session. And the hypnosis session, interestingly, was about dealing with some memories he had with his dad. And he looks in that living room and he says, I think my dad used to live here. And he pointed right to that corner that I felt that unusual energy. And my friend had seen that energy moving back there. And he said, he died right there.
Oh my goodness.
I know. I mean, talking about confirmation, full circle. That was just unreal. Yeah.
And then just happens to be that the person looking for hypnosis finds you, and just happens to be that it's the house his dad passed away in. Like, that is unbelievable.
I know. And some
Wow.
residue or whatever is still there in that corner. And he came to this very spot to deal with some issues with his dad.
Yeah.
It
Was he able to process and be okay?
Yeah, he was. He was very good at that. He was just wanting to move past some things, and it was just kind of unreal. Now, I have seen a few other like entities or beings. I wouldn't call them ghosts necessarily. There was, when I was doing a lot of the regression work with experiencers, they call themselves experiencers now. We used to call them abductees.
Yeah.
There was oftentimes the people from that UFO group would bring someone to me, and they would come too, kind of as a support for the session, during the session. And this one morning, I knew that I had an appointment that day with a woman that wanted a regression, and another woman from the UFO group would be coming with her. And we had a house at that time that had an opening over the sink that you could see into the living area. This was a different house than the other one. And it was like mid-morning or so, and I kept looking. I kept seeing something out of the corner of my eye over there in that corner of that living room. And it seemed to be masculine, a male, and it was a dark, tall figure. And I kept thinking it was my husband, but I knew he'd gone to work. He was gone, from the house. But I would keep seeing this, and then I think, what is this? Because he was gone. It wasn't him, but, and then when I look at it straight on, I couldn't see it. It was just peripheral vision thing. And then they got there, the woman and the support system from the group, they got there, and we sit in the living room, and she starts talking about her experiences. And from her childhood up, she could always remember in bed at night, she could see this tall, dark, masculine figure. And I didn't want to say anything, but I was thinking, I think they showed up here today.
Yeah.
Because I think that's what I was seeing in the corner. Now, luckily for me, I never had any fear of anything like that, or anything showing up at my house or causing any problems or damaging anything, because when she was gone, it was gone. It was like, it didn't have anything to do with me. This was her thing that she was bringing, but it was there earlier, for sure, because, just kept picking up on it.
Yeah. So was that entity a negative entity or positive?
She perceived it to be a very negative thing that created a lot of fear in her,
Yeah.
It really wasn't a therapeutic session that we were doing. We were doing more just memory regression for her, her benefit, to be able to process it, what had happened to her throughout her entire life. It was roughly. So from my perspective, since this did not really relate with me on a personal level, I did not perceive negativity from it. Oddity, yes. Out of place, yes. It was there. But I honestly think it was there because I think she was coming in, and that was going to be the start of her. Could be something also that just, that traveled with her a lot, because and I've done so many of these, whether it be regressions or readings for people, or just all kinds of things working in this field. But I've never had a negative experience myself that I would consider a negative experience.
That's wonderful.
Unexplained, yes, that could have been fearful and negative. A little, like, wonder what that was, kind of thing. But I haven't, but nothing that's ever interfered or bothered, myself or my life at all.
Good. Frosty, do you have any questions before I continue with mine?
Oh, you can keep going.
Okay.
We're kind of stay on the same subject here.
Okay. So, and then, but wait, there's more because you do so many things. Remote viewing. So, have you remote viewed? Well, there's so many different topics with remote viewing. Let's start with this. Have you remote viewed a off Earth place?
Funny you should ask. I used to do an intuitive night, just free of charge. The community could come and they could. A few people would take a 3x5 card and they'd write a question on one side, and we'd gather the cards. And I didn't like to have too many. Maybe 6 to 8 sessions. Is all I would do. So this wasn't the traditional coordinate drawing remote viewing. This was just intuitively, remote viewing something. But this one night, I think I had 4 cards, and I did not know what was the question nor who asked it. So this was blind. Everything was blind that I did at those sessions. So I would put 4 numbers on the back of each card, and so I had a target, and did not know what was on the other side. So this one night, I connect with the 4 numbers, and immediately I see 4 separate images. One were these arches, very tall, kind of crisscross, kind of like the McDonald's arches, something like that, only taller and not the same color. There was a tunnel that, seemed to go down in the ground and then turn, kind of curved. There was a pod, looked a little bit like a clamshell, but much larger, that held something. And then there was a tower. And I spoke these things. And then immediately when I came out, I drew them so I wouldn't forget what I had seen. And I had no idea what they related to. That was it. That was the end of what came in. So I turned the card over, and the question was, what is on the moon? And I'm like, well, we can't verify it.
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
So,
yeah.
And I'm one of those people. I'm just a stickler for trying to, get as much validation on things as possible, and not just making claims beyond what I can or cannot do. So I'm just kind of blowing this off like, well, that was probably a miss, but also kept the diagram, kept the pictures, in the question. And within there, again, the synchronicities that always happen to me. I was at a UFO conference, probably a week to 2 weeks after that, something like that. And there was a book dealer there that I knew him pretty well. And while I was there, I just walked up to him. I said, hey, do you know any books that talk about things being on the moon? And he said, yeah, I got a book for you. And he reaches over and he finds Ingo Swann's book, who was a famous remote viewer, called Penetration. And it was all about remote viewing the moon. And I scanned through the book, and there are 2 pages that are just diagrams of what he did in that lengthy, 6-month or whatever it was, process of remote viewing the moon, where he didn't know what he was remote viewing either. And there was my arch and the tower and the pod, all 4 of them drawn almost exactly the same way I drew.
Wow.
So I thought, well, this is interesting, validation again.
Yeah.
It seems like I get a lot of validation with the things that I'm searching for. That's that manifesting quickly back to you. If you ask a question, you get an answer. So I ask a lot of questions and I get a lot of answers. So
wow. Well, now let's
That's
go.
interesting.
Let's go to the moon and see.
Yeah. Well, we
Where's
had
the tower and the arches and the tunnel, and yeah.
I haven't heard anyone else who's remote viewed the moon that that has seen those. I haven't heard of anyone that has. Just me and Ingo. So,
Wow.
I don't know. If they're actually there or not. But
I know there's been a lot of pictures on the moon, that people see structures in, and so I wouldn't be surprised. The moon is really interesting. There's a lot of things about the moon that seem like they would be impossible. That at first glance I would in no way jump on that bandwagon, but my mind has been kind of turned with all kinds of kind of theories about the moon that I don't know. There's something abnormal about it. Something abnormal about the moon.
Yeah. And in Ingo's book, Penetration, he also got validation. There was a book that had been written sometime before his experiment, which I don't know the years that he actually did this work. But the man who wrote it, I think the name of it was Someone Else's on the Moon or something like that. I got a copy of it. It was out of print, but I got a copy of it from somewhere. And but he was given, they never would tell him who was hiring him to do this project. He was offered money. He said he probably knew it wasn't probably the government because they didn't usually pay much. But they paid him quite a bit, and they took him to an underground facility, and that's where he did all the work. And they didn't front load him. He didn't know he was remote viewing the moon. Eventually, he guessed he was remote viewing the moon, but he did not know for sure. And they told him he would get some validation down the road sometime. And eventually they sent him this book, Somebody Else's on the Moon. And it was about a man who just took photographs of the moon with really high-end cameras back in the day. And no matter where he would take these photos, I mean, people would say, yeah, that's a structure. That's this or this or this. Little kids could even point it out. Much of the same stuff that Ingo had remote viewed, he was photographing,
Yeah.
And so many of the things on the moon, I think that we get images back, they are blurred, or they just leave it out or mark it out or something like that. I don't know.
Yeah. Very interesting.
Yeah, Richard Hoagland was one of the first people I heard talk about stuff on the moon. And then, you listen to it as, just, as a younger kid listening to this stuff, and you're going, oh, that would be crazy. But, kind of being kind of skeptical about it. But then as you get older and the more you I started looking into this stuff, and it's like, oh, like the moon does ring like a bell? Like, what are you talking about? What are you like, hold on, that can't happen.
Right.
Some weird stuff.
So talking about the moon, talking about the orbs and cattle mutilations and some of the things we talked about tonight, I feel like it would be neglectful not to ask you, as I've asked many of our other guests, what's going on right now, Linda, when it comes to congressional hearings and stuff like that? Is this something that we should get excited for? Are we getting ready to get disclosure, or are we just being kind of led along again?
I think we're probably being prepared for some form of disclosure, but I doubt if we'll get the full disclosure. I think this is, if it is, like, we're pretty open-minded here, the three of us talking about all of this stuff, and we've explored a lot of other realities possibly, and things that we don't perceive or comprehend particularly well, and we're kind of open to that. But if all of these things are really in a realm that dimensional realm or whatever, that people are not going to buy into that easily. I think people would buy extraterrestrial before they would buy that there are these dimensions that are interacting with us constantly, but we don't perceive it most of the time. So I think that we are being prepared slowly but surely with very, very limited information, and I don't know if we can trust all the information being accurate, because I think there's going to be an agenda to sway the people to see this from a very limited point of view, so it can go into however it is desired to sway the people to act and behave and be. So I think we're opening up ever so slightly more to it, to the ideas of this happening. I think it's a start, but a start to where or to what, I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
What's the intention and what's the end result? And I have not remote viewed that, nor have I intuitively looked at that specifically. This is just me, talking right now.
Yeah.
Because I haven't really looked at that.
I feel like it's interesting because there's a lot of people that I will talk to about this subject, and they'll say, there's no way there's going to be disclosure, or there's definitely going to be disclosure. My question has always been about kind of like what you were talking about, can the average citizen, because I know I'm not the average person. I host a paranormal talk show, so like I'm not the everyday Joe on the street, but
I'm not normal.
Yeah, I'm not. I'm a weirdo. Can the average person, what would be their reaction to real disclosure? And that's not even necessarily saying like, hey, we're gonna announce that there are ET and that UFOs are visiting from other parts, so other dimensions. I mean, who knows what it is, right? But I think then the question becomes, even if they can get over that, even if that doesn't destroy their worldview, essentially the government is going to admit at that point in time that they've been lying for 80 years.
They won't.
Yeah.
They will never admit that.
Yeah. And so how do you have disclosure without that admittance?
Yeah, I think it's a slow process. Well, first of all, my generation will die off and no one will remember what they've said before. So I think the younger generation will have a new story and there will be a new role that the government plays in this interface, possibly. I remember one time I was invited, and this was probably around 2002 or something like that. I was invited to a senior citizens center to talk about UFOs. And I thought, well, this is going to be very interesting because these people, and, back even 20 years ago, even older people at that center, now they would be like 95 or 105. Okay. Because they were old then. But that generation had a completely different perspective. And I knew that was probably the way it would be. I mean, if you're not into this. So I'm thinking, I don't know who the activities planner is here, but I don't think they're going to be open to this. So I went in, prepared to give a light talk about UFOs. And they eventually, they all started listening, and then slowly, they went off and played their card games and pool and whatever. Only one guy stayed and listened to my entire talk. I think that is kind of a sampling of how people will be with this. They have a set idea of how reality is, and it's a lot like the Bigfoot community. There's the flesh and blood community, and there's the community that is open to all of these other things, that Bigfoot might be. So I think that they will have to give some kind of a concrete physical answer about what these beings are. And I think it's easier for people to believe that they're beings from another planet than it is to believe that they're beings from another dimension.
Yeah.
So I think there will be, and maybe the hearings were simply to see how the public would respond even. But I think there was definitely going to be an agenda. Maybe there could be a plan, to bring the world together with this, false flag thing, where UFOs are landing or something like that too. So they have to, slowly plant it in the minds of people that they actually do exist in order for that to happen.
Yeah.
And there's just so much technology out there now. I mean, they could fake that very easily. We can't tell virtual reality from non-virtual reality.
Yeah.
That's just a given, so
Yeah.
very easily a false landing could actually, a false invasion could be created with
Yeah.
means, and we would not know the difference.
Yeah. And it's so much, so much drip drop. Like this keeps like, it's big news and then it goes away. And then it's big news and it goes away. And in chat, Plain Toast No Jam just was talking about what's going on politically right now. There's a lot of news going on since the beginning of the year, since the inauguration. There's been a lot of news, no matter what side you are on that. But
Yeah,
I
to
think you are correct.
conveniently help us forget about it. Yeah.
It has conveniently covered the news cycle of I'm not getting my news feed covered with UFO stuff anymore, or UAP stuff,
Yeah.
whatever they're
It
calling
just went away, right?
it. Went away really quickly. And
Yeah.
it's going to be back. It's going to be back. But it's coming in drip drops, and I have no idea. I feel like there's something very, I don't know, like something's just going to come out of left field. Like they're going to try to, like I was talking about before, how do you have some kind of disclosure without admitting everything? And I feel like there's some plan, and I don't see what it is yet, but I think there is one.
I think there is one too, and I think we'll just get bits and pieces of there again, and they may just test the waters. How do people respond? I think that it's going to be really difficult for a lot of people to process this, in religious communities, especially. I think they're going to have a hard time and integrating that into their own personal worship. So I think they're not going to crush that very hard with information, because it's kind of like a stable society is really dependent upon sane people. So I think
Yeah.
it's hard to take, those things that create a platform within your own psychological being, and just wash that away without creating a panic zone in people. So that would be
Yeah.
really hard. And that's true intuitively too. And that's something that, I never, push my thoughts and beliefs off on anyone, because I understand
Yeah.
they may not be in a position where they can handle that even.
Yeah.
I remember a point of, in my progression of opening up to things, there was a point it was just kind of a point of, just not knowing what to believe at all, because everything in my reality was very different all of a sudden. And a large part of that was just getting rid of I didn't know what reality really was anymore, because I'd been that physical reality had been my world, and it took a while. I mean, it was really like an unstable kind of feeling inside. I mean, it wasn't like I was mentally unstable, but it was an unstable feeling inside to not know the truth. Eventually, I grew past that and feel really comfortable, today. That was in the 90s, that all that happened, but I progressed really fast, through a lot of different levels of information coming in, and the hypnosis, and just being able to go into those inner level states really fast. So I think that if there was too much information suddenly downloaded in by our government or wherever, that I think people might have a hard time processing it.
Yep.
So I don't think they're going to do that. They're not going to just disclose. And everyone in the UFO community, I can so appreciate, I'm one of you, would love to have that disclosure,
Yeah.
but we've been processing this for a long time.
For 80 years.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean,
How
yeah,
much
it really
longer
is.
do we need, people?
I know.
Well, Linda, I want to ask you, we're running low on time here. We've gone a little bit over. We had a little bit of a shorter conversation tonight, but I wanted to ask you one last thing. What do you have coming up? What are you working on? And once we get through that, where can people find you online and all that?
Well, I'm on Facebook. You can always come follow me on there. Everything I do is going to be out on Facebook. I also have, if you're interested in Bigfoot, I have a Bigfoot group on Facebook called Bigfoot Cryptid Midwest. On YouTube, that's where you're going to see all of the videos that I have coming out, and that's just Linda Eastburn YouTube channel, just real simple. Otherwise, and all of my intuitive, the new intuitive book I have coming out, the spy book, I call it spy because it's super powered insight, is what it's called, and helps you, to get into those levels and then manifest quickly through a biophysics and spiritual process combined. So I've got that. The book should come out within a month or two. And then the programs that I'm teaching, those will be out shortly thereafter in conjunction with that. So I plan on continuing doing YouTube videos. I plan on adding some of these, some of this program, the spy program with it. And that will just continue to grow and evolve, because that's just what I do. When I start something, I just keep growing it. So,
Yeah.
So
the YouTube link is up at the chat on Twitch, and if you scroll back on on Twitch, and then on YouTube, it's back in there. It'll also be all those links will be shared in the description boxes for all of the podcast platforms.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much for joining us, Linda. We'd love to have you back on down the road to continue the conversation.
Yeah.
Yes.
So
It's
many
been fun.
topics. There's always more questions.
Always more questions.
Sure.
All right, everyone. So for all of you listening at another time, in another place, we will see you next time. And for everyone who's still hanging out in chat, thanks so much for hanging out tonight. Thank you for the questions. We always appreciate seeing you all in here. It's so nice to see you all. Jenny, we got stream tomorrow night?
Yep.
Right?
I'll be here.
Right.
I don't know what I'll be doing. Hopefully
Jenny Lee,
hopefully we'll be doing a normal stream. We'll see. Nothing's been normal.
So hopefully some medium readings tomorrow.
Yeah. For rating, Blue Light Oracle is on doing tarot. If you're interested in taking somebody.
I was looking at that. We got Weird Paul, Black Sheep Meat,
Scorpio.
Blue Oracle, Scorpio's on.
Wherever you want to go.
right,
Thank you
let's,
all. What even is normal? I know. Not to get on a whole nother conversation, but when Linda mentioned the society being sane, I was like, but what if we can switch what sanity is?
Yeah, that's kind of going down that.
Let's
how
open the
esoteric can we get?
sanity up a little bit so that we can make this a little bit better. Anyway, who are you rating?
I'm gonna go
Weird
rate Weird Paul.
Paul. Oh, nice.
All right, everybody. See you guys later. See you tomorrow. Take care. See y'all next time.
Bye.